Se eu tivesse buscado ajuda quando eu saí do mundo árabe, eu poderia ter ido mais longe assim na minha carreira, até mesmo, né? Ter entendido mais o que estava acontecendo comigo. Eu fui levado até ajuda, para ser sincero, no dia que eu tive uma paralisação total do meu corpo, assim, de acharem que eu tava tendo um infarto.
Isso, tu tava em casa?
Tava, não, foi depois de um jogo. Eu acabei tomando decisões ali no final da minha carreira um pouco influenciadas. Uma delas foi ter ido pro Santos na época.
He had it all: talent, fame, and a promising football career. But depression changed everything. Today we're going to talk about Nilmar, one of the greatest talents in Brazilian football, and how depression devastated his career and personal life. How can the weight of the mind be heavier than any opponent on the field? Stay with us to understand the trajectory of an icon who saw his life turned upside down. My name is Brinox, and let's go to another video. And don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and recommend this video to other people. This will greatly help the continuation of my work. Nilmar Honorado da Silva was born in Bandeirantes, a small town in the interior of Parana, where football has been his passion since childhood. At just 5 years old, he was already dodging his friends on the city streets, showing an unusual talent. His talent soon caught the attention of Internacional, where he took his first steps into professional football. At the age of 17, Nilmar debuted for the main team, already demonstrating the brilliance and skill that would make him one of the greatest players in Brazil. After his success at Internacional, Nilmar crossed the Atlantic to shine in Europe. At Lyon, one of the biggest clubs in France, he stood out as a quick and skillful striker, winning titles and gaining international recognition. Back in Brazil, at Internacional, Nilmar played one of the most memorable moments of his career, the 2006 Copa Libertadores title. The joy of conquering America with his favorite club further consolidated his image as one of the great players of Brazilian football. At 22 years old, his rise was unquestionable. Called up to the Brazilian national team, Nilmar was part of the team in important tournaments, such as the 2007 Copa America, and his presence in the squad only reaffirmed his status as a rising star. With his skill, charisma, and decisive goals, Nilmar seemed ready to conquer the world. But behind his fame, challenges were hidden that he would never have imagined facing. Despite a brilliant career full of potential, Nilmar faced an opponent he couldn't dribble: injuries. At the peak of his physical form, a sequence of muscular problems began to limit his performances, sidelining him from the field. Being away from what he loved most, playing not only took a toll on his body, but also on his mind. The psychological impact of having your career cut short, of not knowing if you could return to form, was devastating. The injuries, not only physically, but also emotionally, began to weaken Nilmar. Over the years, he began to feel the weight of pressure to recover. The wear and tear of having to prove with each injury that he was still capable of playing at the highest level became an increasing psychological burden. As injuries piled up, Nilmar tried to find his feet and start over at new clubs. At Corinthians, expectations were high, but he soon faced an environment of constant pressure. The instability at the club and the intense pace of Brazilian football made it difficult for him to find his feet again. After his time at Corinthians, Nilmar went to Villarreal in Spain, where he experienced new ups and downs. European football, with its fast and relentless pace, did not offer the emotional stability he so needed. Every movement, every performance seemed to be a test of his mental resistance. In big clubs and leagues, where pressure is constant, Nilmar did not find complete recovery. Injuries, uncertainty, and the psychological weight of always being under pressure affected not only his body, but also his desire to continue. From club to club, Nilmar tried to reinvent himself. But over time, it became clear that the biggest challenges were not just injuries or pressure from big clubs, but within himself. With each change, the feeling that his body and mind could no longer keep up with the high standards demanded by professional football grew. What seemed to be the end of a brilliant career was, in fact, just beginning to show the signs of deep, invisible suffering. Gradually, the shine that was always associated with Nilmar began to fade. What seemed to be just a moment of low form or a temporary difficulty on the field proved to be something much deeper. The first signs of depression began to emerge. During his spells at various clubs, Nilmar began to report emotional difficulties that went beyond physical injuries. In interviews, he mentioned a feeling of exhaustion not only physically, but also mentally, a constant struggle to deal with pressure, demands, and the frustrations of no longer being the same player. He was beginning to show clear signs that something was wrong. In some of his statements, Nilmar spoke openly about the difficulty of dealing with the pressure of football and the media. He admitted to feeling lost, as if the weight of expectation was crushing him. Nilmar's career at Santos is marked by a moment of great expectation, but also of a lot of suffering, especially with regard to mental and emotional health. His arrival at the club in 2014 was seen as an opportunity to rescue the talent and experience of a player who, despite being in his early 30s, still had a lot to offer Brazilian football. However, what many didn't know was how much the athlete was facing difficulties beyond the physical challenges. In 2014, after a career of ups and downs in Europe, Nilmar was signed by Santos with great expectations. His arrival at the São Paulo club generated a certain optimism, not only due to his technical quality, but also due to the experience acquired in major international leagues, such as France and Spain. The fans believed that he could be the decisive player, capable of helping the team return to fighting for titles and giving more quality to the attack. However, injuries began to affect Nilmar's performance as soon as he started at Santos. Although he showed flashes of his skill and experience in some matches, it was not enough to live up to the expectations of the club and fans. The physical pain, which had tormented him since his time at Villarreal, was more present than ever, and he began to realize that his health was being compromised in an alarming way. The pressure on Nilmar increased as time passed. Demand for his performance in matches intensified, especially because he had been hired to be the player who could transform the team. But inside, he was battling a growing depression. The feeling of not being able to live up to what was expected of him, combined with chronic injuries, was reflected in his performance and behavior off the field. In several interviews, Nilmar mentioned how professional football, with its incessant pressure and the need for constant performance, was becoming increasingly difficult to deal with. He talked about sleepless nights, anxiety, and the feeling of no longer being able to do his best. It wasn't just his physique that was weakened. The psychological was also completely overwhelmed. The pressure didn't just come from the fans or the media, but also from the internal pressure itself. Nilmar wanted to be the same player who shone at Internacional, Lion, and the Brazilian team, but signs of emotional fatigue and the pressure of the heavy environment of a big club were factors that began to undermine his motivation. The physical injuries, combined with depression, created a cycle of frustration and discouragement. In 2015, just 1 year after arriving at Santos, Nilmar made the difficult decision to step away from professional football due to severe depression. What seemed like a promising return to Brazil turned into a definitive break for the striker. He announced that he needed time to look after his mental health, something rarely discussed publicly in football's highly competitive environment. His departure from Santos was shocking, not only because of how quickly it happened, but also because it indicated the seriousness of the emotional situation he was facing. Upon stepping away from football, Nilmar prioritized taking care of himself, recognizing that he could not continue in such a demanding environment while dealing with deep emotional suffering. His decision to step away from the cameras and the media was an attempt to regain his mental health and reconnect with what made him start playing football, his passion for the sport, without the weight of external expectations. Following his abrupt departure from Santos in 2015, Nilmar stepped away not only from football, but also from the spotlight in an effort to deal with the emotional challenges that had deeply affected him. His retirement was a time of reflection and recovery, and he began to prioritize his mental health above all else, which proved to be a difficult but necessary decision. In later interviews, Nilmar revealed that, throughout the years he was away, he fought intensely to overcome the effects of depression that kept him away from football. The journey to recovery was not easy. In some statements, he mentioned the feeling of no longer being the same player of not being able to live up to expectations and the impact that the constant pressure of football had on his mental health. The decision to leave the sport was painful, but he knew he needed time to reconnect with himself and his own happiness. In 2016, he spoke openly about the impact of depression, saying that the break was essential for him to be able to truly take care of himself. Nilmar recognized that he had neglected his mental health for a long time, prioritizing the physical demands of football to the detriment of his emotional well-being. "I was destroyed inside," he said in one of the interviews, reflecting on the weight of injuries and pressure. He also spoke about the difficulty of asking for help, a process that is often difficult for athletes who fear showing vulnerability. He mentioned how family support was crucial during this period. For Nilmar, understanding that it was okay to not be okay was an important turning point. He also highlighted how therapy and psychological support helped him deal with his feelings and deal with the string of injuries that plague him during his career. After leaving, Nilmar dedicated himself to causes that went beyond football. He became involved in social actions and began to focus on his personal life, taking care of his physical and mental health. One of the things that stood out most during this period was the decision to open a dialogue about mental health and sport, especially for other athletes going through similar challenges to yours. In more recent interviews, Nilmar shared his experience with fans and the media, highlighting the importance of taking care of your mind and breaking the stigma that, as an athlete, you need to be strong all the time. His struggle with depression and retirement from football became an example that even high-level athletes are vulnerable and, like any human being, need support and space to recover. Furthermore, Nilmar has become an advocate for the importance of mental health, not just for athletes, but for anyone going through moments of emotional distress. He participated in campaigns and interviews that addressed the need to break the silence about psychological problems, helping to normalize the conversation about depression in sport and everyday life. In some of his interviews, Nilmar was emphatic in stating that the fight for mental health is an ongoing battle. He emphasized the importance of listening to your body and mind and having the courage to admit that you need help. Nilmar also encouraged other athletes not to feel ashamed about seeking psychological support, saying that true strength is knowing when to stop and take care of yourself. In one of his most impactful statements, Nilmar said, "Football gave me a lot, but it also took a lot from me. Today, the most important thing is my health, my peace of mind, and being well with the people I love." In recent years, Nilmar has been rebuilding his life outside the fields. Although he has stepped away from professional football, he has explored other opportunities, such as involvement in social projects and acting as a sports commentator, sharing his experience with the public, and helping to create a more inclusive and aware environment about the psychological challenges faced by players. Although he did not return to professional football, Nilmar found a new way to contribute to the sport, helping young athletes understand the importance of taking care of their mental health. He has also participated in events to talk about his journey, helping to raise the flag for mental health in sport.